So welcome back to another episode of Fertility Ain't for the podcast. I'm your host, Britt, and I am always so fortunate to almost never be alone in this seat. And we have, as always, a treat because whenever someone says yes to a stranger, says yes to telling their story, sharing their resources, their skills, etc., we are always happy to have you. And today we have someone who has been through this space or been in this space, I should say, for quite some time, about 3 decades, I would think at this point. Mary Fusillo is joining us, and she has a lot of titles behind her name. So I want to get this right. So RN, BSN, MS, founder and CEO of Family Solutions International. And Mary was actually introduced to this whole area of endocrinology, reproductive medicine, and infertility and healthcare while facing her own challenges having children. So, of course, we're going to get into her story because that's super important to just kick us off. But she's also been really big in building egg donor programs, finding donors, starting them across the country, from Houston to DC. Of course, she has her own business now. And I saw you also in 2019 decided because you weren't busy enough to start a PhD program in bioethics. So we're definitely going to get into that because you had nothing else to do. Right? And we're going to talk a lot about what does the whole donor egg services look like? How do you do it? What are the ethical or moral conversations happening around it? And I shared with Mary offline when we first connected that I was really intrigued by it because from a personal standpoint, we're in a new space. We, of course, went into IVF hoping that after multiple rounds, we would have our child, right? We would have a toddler at this point running around our house. And unfortunately, we're a couple that I'll say, traditional IVF with your own eggs did not end up working for. And so now we're in this space of, do we just stop because we've been through enough? That's also okay to say, I'm done. Or do we look at, donor services and donor eggs and being honest about what that transition looks like, because it's not an easy decision for multiple reasons. So we're definitely going to talk about that. But it can be a solution to build or expand a family. So we're going to get into all of that on this episode of Fertility Ain't for the podcast. So Mary, welcome. You're in the hot seat.
well, thank you so much. And thank you for the great introduction. But I've had a long career. So, yes, I have grown children. I've had a long career. And so all those accolades took a long time to build up.
Yes. Well, we'll jump right on in because we have a lot to unpack as always. So the first question I always start out with our guest is, how are you currently defining yourself? What are words, phrases, et cetera, to get to know a little bit more outside of your bio about who Mary is as of today?
Well, I consider myself an empty nester right now. And I've been an empty nester for a couple of years. Number two, I am a business owner who's transitioning out of the day in, day out operations of the business and turning my company over to my COO. Okay, so I'm going to transition out while she transitions into the CEO role, and while still keeping one of my businesses, which is the fertility consultants, because I love the consulting part. The day in, day out business part can get a little old sometimes, but the consulting part I love because I love to help people kind of find their way in the fertility space because, and basically, the evolution of IVF clinics is such that they preach IVF, and they don't hear anything else because it's such a money business now. So I wanted to help people find their way when they're stuck with complex things. Do we stop? Do we go? Do we do IVF again? Do we do donor egg? Do we try a different clinic? So that's kind of where I am right now.
Well, first, thank you for being in that space because, as you said, it's a lot to navigate, and people need consultants to do that, right? We have consultants for everything else in this world, so why not have them for the infertility space? I sure wish I would have had you 7+ years ago because, what I know now. But thank you for being in this space. So let's go back to, I guess, kind of the beginning and how you got into the career of this. And so you mentioned that, you were having your own challenges, having children. So can you take us back to that space? I know you're an empty nester now, so it's like, ooh, that was
It
such
was
a
a
long time
long
ago.
time ago in the last
But
century, right?
could
Long
you
time
give
ago.
us, yeah, a little
Well,
bit of what was happening at that point in time?
so I actually did not get married until I was in my mid 30s. And at a time when women were still, most of my peers were married by their mid to late 20s, even if they were career oriented. I just didn't find the right guy per se. And I know that sounds kind of like, well, what do you mean? Well, sometimes by the time I was 30, seriously, most of the good guys were already married, and the ones that were now like had 3 little kids and wanted to have a second wife, I wasn't interested. I wanted a guy that had no kids and never been married before. So that was really hard to find. I found the one, we got married, and we had a lot of discussions about having children. I was adamant that we have children. And this is one of those things where I didn't hear him when we were dating. Okay. Like I didn't hear him say kind of, I'm not really into having kids. I don't want kids. I don't want kids. So, and the thing is, my husband had a vasectomy before we even met. Okay. He
And
really
you all
didn't want.
discussed that. He brought it up in dating. He said, I had, oh, not so much.
Not so much. Okay. So
Okay.
anyway, we got married, and then I started going, but I want a family. I really do. And it got to the point where I was like 36. And I was like, the clock is going tick, 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 tick. And that's what my dream was. And I had vowed before I met my husband that if I did not have a child by 40, that I would adopt. Because at the time, I mean, this is like mid 90s, it really wasn't cool. And I didn't feel it was for me to be a single mother by choice by finding some random guy or going to a sperm bank. That's fine. It just wasn't for me at the time. Now I think maybe I should have rethought that. No, just kidding. But anyway, so I finally talked him into it 18 months later. And while the doctors did not suggest he have a reversal, they suggested, because of my age and you didn't want to do a reversal, wait 6 months and then keep trying. We'd have been 40 by that time, that we go straight to IVF, where they actually go get the sperm from the guy. Not to get too into the weeds, but they did a MESA procedure, which is epididymal sperm extraction. So they go with a long needle into the testicles and they pull out the sperm, because even if you had a vasectomy, they're still making sperm. They just don't go anywhere. So he did that, bless his little heart. And we ended up with a lot of sperm. And so we went through IVF, and we ended up with we had a lot of eggs and a lot of embryos. And so at the time they were still transferring more than one. So they transferred 3 embryos. And I got pregnant with triplets. And yeah, my husband had said one. It's always funny to me, but my husband said when he did this, we could have one child and no pets. Okay.
That's
Remember that.
how
One
our
child
household is. Like, if
and
we
no
had one, no pets would be good.
one child, no pets. Okay. So I was like, okay, whatever. I had an old cat, but he figured the cat wasn't going to live for that long. Right. So I ended up staying pregnant with twins. The one just disappeared by 8, 9, 10 weeks, which is very typical in IVF and very typical in a multiple situation. And this was a blastocyst transfer, for those who are out there that know the terminology, which was very unusual in 1997. I was the first person at this clinic to ever have a blastocyst transfer. Thank you so much for making me the guinea pig. And that's when they started giving people 5 and 6 embryos. So you don't see triplets and quads and quints anymore. You see twins now and then in IVF. Anyway, so we had a boy, we had a girl, and at the time I was director of critical care at a hospital, or I ended up on bed rest, all this other kind of stuff. So I had kind of left that job, and afterwards I didn't want to go back to that. I didn't want to go back to the hospital. And so for about 18 months I kind of did part-time house supervisor, that kind of stuff. But I was very career oriented. And a friend of a friend told me about a job at an IVF clinic. They were looking for somebody that had the experience, that had the management experience, but they were taking the IVF clinic to a new level. Now, it's hard to believe for those of you who have been in it recently, but back in the day, the IVF doctors, the infertility clinics were like a doctor. It was like a doctor's office, and it had ultrasound, and maybe 4 or 5 docs would have a surgery center where they went to do egg retrievals. And the physician I went to work for, was going to the next level where she was going to have an operating room and a recovery room, and embryology was going to be there. And then we expanded and had, so it was a really cool job. And that's how I got into infertility in 1999.
Wow. Well, congrats for being an IVF mama.
I was fortunate. First try.
Yeah, that's
a
huge.
boy and a girl.
Yeah.
I figured that I had done something right somewhere along the line, karma wise, but it was a grueling pregnancy. I spent 8 weeks in the hospital. I had preeclampsia. I had preterm labor. And I still had embryos left over. So at like my 6th, I kept having all these postpartum complications. And so it's about 6 months, I go back to the high risk doctor that I had used. And I was sitting there and I said, hey, I'm thinking maybe I should have another baby. Now, my husband is not part of that conversation because remember, he was 1 kid and no pets. And he looked at me, pulled up his little stool, and he goes, it's a uterus, not a clown car. And I was like, oh, he meant,
wow.
Look, he goes, because he had just done the delivery of the octuplets in Houston in 1998. So this woman had 8 babies, 7 survived.
Yes.
And he was like, I'm done. Okay. So he goes, you have 2, you were really sick in your pregnancy. If you were my wife, I'd say you're good. You have 2 kids, move on down the road. And I was like, okay. And I could put it away. I didn't really, it took me a few years because when you have infertility and you've dealt with all this, all you can think of is I want more. I want to be a more mom. I want to have more kids.
Yeah.
But I will say now, 27 years later, I'm like, well, I'm glad we only had 2.
So you said you had more embryos, though. Eggs or embryos?
Embryos.
What did you decide to do with your embryos?
Well, they sat there on ice for a few years. And, at the time you didn't pay for it. I know this sounds weird, but you didn't pay to store them. So they just kind of sat there. And we were in Williamsburg, Virginia with the kids. And we were on, going to Williamsburg or whatever. And we were staying at some, little motel next to Williamsburg, the Williamsburg Inn or something. And in the middle of the night, there was a fire alarm. And we're like, oh, so everybody gets up. Now, this is the kind where you parked in front of the door. Okay. And so we all we pour out of our room. And I look at the people next door, and kid after kid after kid was coming out of that room during the fire alarm. I was like, oh my God, there's like 5 or 6 kids sleeping on air mattresses in this motel room. And at that moment I went, I think I can donate those embryos now. I'm done. Yep. Yeah. And so we donated the embryos. I actually found a woman through an internet group. This is early in the 2000s. And she and I became like, we talked back and forth. We signed the paperwork. They went to her. She was a nurse. She and I shared the same first name. And she'd never been able to get pregnant. No matter what they did, she couldn't get pregnant, IVF, everything. So they decided to try donor embryo because they were at the end of their money. Okay. Yeah. And so doing donor egg and all that. So it's kind of less expensive. You're only paying for the transfer and your workup. You're not paying for all this other stuff. And she did not get pregnant with any of the embryos. So part of me took a big, deep sigh of relief that I don't have to deal with that. But the other part of me was really sad because then I thought, well, I wouldn't, I thought to myself, well, I wouldn't have gotten pregnant with him either. And then I would have had that heartache, which is selfish for me to think. But she ended up sending me this fabulous Yadro statue of a woman and a baby, telling me that being able to do this allowed her and her husband to open their hearts to adoption, and that they had gotten a baby on Christmas Eve named Noel. She later found out that she had an autoimmune disorder that was not being addressed, that was causing her lining to not be open to the embryo. So all those things meant she probably never would have gotten pregnant on her own, even with prednisone and steroids, all this kind of stuff. And yet she was able to adopt a baby. So I still carry that. All the different places I've lived in the intervening 20 years, I had this little beautiful thing on my dresser at my house.
I love that. I love that story.
Yeah.
So one question though, before we move on to our next topic. So IVF 90s, what was the thoughts around it? I mean, was it taboo? What were people talking about it?
Yes,
Did you know
it
anybody?
was it was it was
Okay.
I'm a big, I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown. I mean, she's from
Yes,
Houston. Okay,
absolutely.
so I'm a
Yeah.
big fan. Actually, she's from Houston. She actually doesn't live more than a mile from me. And she used to before she became super famous, she used to give talks at my kids' school about parenting and stuff. And the one that always stuck with me is about shame. Okay. And what I found is that people have had in the past, a lot of shame about IVF. Now, I did IVF literally 10, 11 years after it became like people could actually do it. It's still astonishing to me that it worked the first time and I got twins, and yet it had been around for 10, 11 years. Okay. I mean, it was huge. It was starting to grow faster and faster, but there was shame. People were told me, you don't have to tell anybody. Okay. Well, I wanted to tell the clerk at Costco that I did IVF and I'm pregnant with twins. Okay. But the thing was that it was kind of, there was something wrong with you to IVF. Now, then I think it took a metamorphosis and became kind of like, oh yeah, we did IVF. When everyone's done it, like everyone in my group that I knew had done IVF. So it became less of an issue then. But I do think there was a big shame thing surrounding it for a while.
Yeah, no, and even now, I feel like again, you say people that you knew were doing it, right? And I feel like that was probably the key for to have that level of like, oh, this is normal. It's okay, right? It's acceptable to do this. I feel like even I think shame was one of the things that I definitely felt early on. I think it was, I was embarrassed. I felt shame. I felt like I did not know anybody who had done it. So, I mean, now I'm like, oh my God, I never had to feel that way. There's so many of us out here, right? But at the time, it felt very isolating. I didn't also know many women of color who were doing it, or at least being honest about it, right? Like no one was talking about it. So I'm glad to hear that, there has been a transition, I think, again, society wise, in terms of like, oh, it's cool. IVF, sure, no big deal. If you pay
I
for it,
do
cool.
see that. I see that with women of color. Um, Maybe in my experience, it's maybe more Latino or Hispanic women that
Mhm,
tend to
mhm.
have a hot in today's world.
Yeah,
My black customers are like, oh, whatever. Okay. They're no different than everybody else. But
yeah.
the number one group that just really like hides in the corner when they
Yeah.
go to an IVF clinic are Asians.
Interesting.
This is like, and they tend to have a little bit higher rate of infertility. I don't know why, but I mean, I don't know the science behind that, but they
Yeah.
tend to have a little bit higher rate. But anyway, be it that as it may, I've watched the shame, even with donor egg, I've seen the quote unquote shame or secrecy recede a lot. It used to be 100%. Everybody was like, oh, can't tell anybody. I don't want to be in the waiting room with anybody. I mean, I would have people when I worked at the clinic that would say, I can't risk seeing anybody I know in the clinic.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that
Sad.
it's getting better. It's getting more normalized. I'm so glad. So let's jump in to donor egg
Gametes.
services.
Okay. Okay.
so so I guess my first question is going to be in terms of like, I mean, you have built donor programs, you've been talking to donors, screening them for a very long time. I think one of the things, of course, I think I want to go to the donor side first and then the intended parent side. So what do you look for? Like, what are your key things that, could have been, consistent throughout the years, or what are your hot buttons now when you're looking for donors and screening these people? Because I think, again, as an intended parent or someone looking at my first question is, well, are we sure these people are good to go? Are we sure they're screened? Like, I don't know, right? I'm looking through a dating app, right, on a website. So how do I feel comfortable and knowing? I know every company is different, but what do you personally look for when you're looking for donors?
Okay. Well, first, what kind of makes us different is the fact that I've had this long history from the medical side, from the
Yeah,
medical and nursing side. So I'm not an attorney that started this business. I'm not a farmer donor or a
yeah,
surrogate or somebody who said, oh, I think I want to do this. I was actually in the trenches on the other side. And having been an infertility patient, I knew how stressful and horrible and everything it was. So when donors apply to us, and we do get probably 200 applications a month. Now, of that, maybe 20 of them actually go through the process and actually fill out their profile and do this. What we're looking for is we're looking for people who have we started off with they have to have basically, a normal BMI, be between 5 foot tall and 6 foot tall or whatever. Okay. They have to have they can't be indigenous persons. They can't be a Native American because there's a lot of rules with Native American tribes about who's a tribal member, and it's just too much mess to go through. Okay, so that's kind of the nose. After that, we're looking at their health history. It's amazing to me, maybe it's I know too much and I'm jaded, how completely honest they are. And I really encourage that. And so it makes me feel good that the vast majority are like, they vomit information. Okay, like yesterday I looked at a potential one, and don't worry, I hit no, and I have to send a nice little letter. So sorry, you don't meet our criteria. But her father was a meth addict. Her brother was bipolar. Her mother seemed to be okay, but her aunt had 3 kids with autism. I mean, I'm like at the meth addict, I was kind of like, I'm done. Okay. So that's the first line of defense. Now that one was easy to go, I'm sorry, you don't meet the criteria. Where it gets really iffy is even though there's a lot of genetic testing that goes into donors and also to intended parents, the sperm person also, but you also look at other things that don't show up on genetic testings. Like, for instance, I know that if mom had breast cancer, but she's not BRCA positive, so which means she doesn't carry the gene, okay, but her aunt had colon cancer. And her other aunt on the other side had pancreatic cancer, and another one had ovarian cancer. That is all in the same cluster, and they're all considered, I mean, I probably have the genetics wrong, but they're all in the same like part of the gene. Okay. Which means the child could get none of that because when the egg and the sperm, unite, and then then they kick out half the genes, you don't know which half of the genes are going to get kicked out. Right. So this poor child that's going to be yours could get all of those cancer genes and none from the other side, but you don't know that. And there's no way to test for it. So I automatically have to say, this person can't be a donor before any genetic testing has been done because her deck is stacked against a child never having any of those conditions. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It makes a lot of sense.
So the other thing we do besides the health, so that everybody wants to know about health history. We get medical records if they're, 24-year-olds don't have a lot of medical records. Okay. Yeah. But we want to make sure that, they fill out big questionnaires about communicable diseases and sexually transmitted diseases, which I will say a weird thing that I have noticed. We had a big uptick in the mid 2012 to 2017. These donors kept having chlamydia, and they were actually getting gonorrhea, and they were getting syphilis, and it was just horrifying to me. And then it went away, and I attribute it to the lack of a hookup culture now. We asked the girls how many sexual partners they've had, and they're honest. Okay, let me tell you, they're honest. It used to be you'd see these girls and they were like, homecoming queen and Miss Everything and beautiful, and they'd had 23 sexual partners and they were 23. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I mean, how does that happen? Now they're like 1, 2. I don't see it. So I think that the good news is, and this is just my little observation, that hookup culture that was prevalent 10, 12 years ago has kind of gone away. So we're not seeing people with sexually transmitted diseases anymore. And then we're checking their transcripts. They have to provide transcripts. So if they went to college and they have a college degree, we have to see their transcripts. If they want to put their test scores to get into college, SAT, ACT, whatever, on their profile, we have to have a copy of it. So we're checking that. We also do a background check on them so we know who they are, and they fill out a 26-page profile, which is why it takes a long time to get them to fill it out, because we're asking, what's your favorite color? Do you like flowers? Right. So that's a lot of information. I hope that's what you want.
It is, but it's so helpful because I think, again, when someone is thinking or considering this, even in theory, right, it's like, okay, I want to be as sure as possible that this is not just who looks like me or, has the physical attributes, but it's way deeper than that, right? So that's part of it. So on the other side, how are you all coaching like donor parents in this process? Is there a piece of it, is mental health, and there's therapy, and because again, I look at it from my perspective. We've gone through hell and back for over 7 years, and we've arrived at this place where we could go into this. But again, the transition is a lot. It's mentally a lot. It's emotionally a lot. and a lot of factors going into that. So how does your company specifically coach these parents and help them through, this process that can be overwhelming?
Well, first, I will say that there is a distinct difference between parents both regionally and ethnically. Okay. So I have people that have to have, like, when you're talking people like on the East Coast, I'm talking like New York, Boston, Philly, that area, they're very much, and it doesn't matter what ethnicity they are, what race they are, they're very much, I want this, this, and this, and this. I want this, this, and you get more into the center of the country, you get to the South. And it's not, this is an expensive process. So this is not a socioeconomic process. This is like just how you were raised process. They tend to be more into the intangibles. I want a kind girl. A lot of people, especially in the South, will go, I want a Christian girl. I want somebody who loves animals. So they get this other kind of fluff in there. And then you get the West Coast. No dissing on the West Coast, but the West Coast is all about the looks. I have to have them look like me. And that is, to me, should be the fourth or fifth one on your list, is they look like they would fit into your family. So if you took a picture of the girl and put it with your family reunion and nobody went, oh my God, who is that? Then you're fine. It's like, you're not going to find your clone. The kid's not going to look like the donor, and the kid is not going to look just like you or your husband. It's going to look like all of that. I remember when Pope Leo became the Pope, and somebody wrote this article about where his ancestors came from. And they basically said that, where they were able to find the first one that was related to Pope Leo in like the 14th century or whatever, 15th century, he's had 34,000 people had to be born and procreate to make Pope Leo. So when you think about that, think about yourself and go, you know what? I'm really not as special as I thought I was. And I am just happy that somebody wants to give me an egg, because it's only a little tiny bit of the whole picture of being a parent, of growing your own baby, and then raising that. And what I always tell people is, do you want to be a parent or do you want to have a child? And there's a distinct difference between the two.
Oh, that's good. That's good, Mary. Can you dive into that a little bit more? What are the differences between the two?
Okay, so my experience after all these years is, if you want a child, you're looking at, I made this. You're holding it up. I made this. My kid learned to read at 3. And my kid played chess at 5. And my kid made a lacrosse team at 10. And my kid's going to go to a top 25 college. It's all about what you brought into this world as your child. Okay. I feel that you want family or you want a parent means that no matter what I get, I'm so happy that I get to be part of this child's life, that I get to raise them to know right from wrong, to be a good person. And maybe they aren't going to be the person that cures cancer, but they're going to be the person that somebody always says, they're such a nice person. They must have had good parents. And to me, that's the big difference. And when I see people who get really focused on the looks of the donor or her IQ, yeah, nobody wants a dumb donor. I get that. And that we're looking for that. So that's why we get their SAT scores. But the bottom line is, was your goal to parent with your partner? Or even if you're a single parent, did you want to parent? Did you want to go through diapers and then preschool and then elementary school and do science projects and go on family vacations? Or did you want the child that is the lacrosse player?
Thank you so much for breaking that down in a way that's just relatable, because I think that's a really big piece of, again, that puzzle of, again, why are you here? Like, what are your intentions behind why you are either considering or walking into this process? And even for me thinking about it, I think when I first got on the donor sites and did the research and started reaching out to these different places, I was so focused, and I was so hurt by the fact that, okay, I might not have a child that looks like me. And then I realized that sounds dumb, because there are kids who have biological parents who don't even look like them. It's crazy. It was very surface level. And then I was like, no, I started diving deeper into these profiles. And I did go to, again, like, what are your aspirations? What do you enjoy doing? Like, who do I think this person is based off of this profile? And to that point of, do you want to be a parent or is it a child? And that just, for me, just unlocked a whole other level of consideration for this route and this journey, in a way that I think I needed to hear. So thank you personally for that.
Well, I got to tell you something. So I'm out in California right now, and my
Mhm.
husband and I went on this special wine tour yesterday. Now we go on, we like wine, so we've been to a lot of vineyards, but yesterday was
as you
special.
should.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as one should when in California. So we went on this personal tour with the winery owner. Okay.
Mm.
And so we're out there and he's explaining why all the vines died in Burgundy 150 years ago. And I was like, okay, whatever, get it. And then he talked about how they get this fungus. And here's the vine, the vine grows up. Everyone's seen a vine. It goes up and then it kind of comes into a T where they kind of tie it to the stakes or whatever. And he goes and he shows us where they grafted on from the vines in Burgundy onto the American vines to make that kind of grape. And I was like, wait, go back. He goes, yeah. So what happens is the root is nourishes the whole plant. And then you've grafted on this other piece into the plant. He showed me where they tie it up. They just stick it on. They get a little cut, stick it on there. And then that influences the grapes. And I thought, what amazing metaphor for donor egg. Oh my gosh.
Literally.
It's this big. It's a big piece, this big, and there's this big giant vine. And so the deal is the other story I like to tell, which always sticks with people, is when let's say you go to New York and you're going to see Meryl Streep or Helen Mirren, okay, in some play, and you're like, oh my God, I paid $500 for this ticket. I can't even wait. And you sit in your seat with your little play guide, and they say, I'm sorry, playing the part of so-and-so tonight is Susan Jones. And you're like, I paid all this money to see Susan Jones and not Helen Mirren or Meryl Streep. So you sit in your chair and you take a heavy sigh, and then you get into the play. And the reason this play won all these Tony Awards is because it's such an amazing play. And you completely forget that is not Helen Mirren or Meryl Streep up there. It's the actor. And that's what I think about. Okay, so you didn't go and get you got a stand-in for you, and the stand-in happened to be fabulous, and that's why you pick a donor that you think meets all your criteria, because then they're going to have the same kind of characteristics, and it's up to you to mold them into the child that you would have had even if you'd had sex in the backseat of a Chevy.
I love it. It's very true. Okay, so one thing. So I joined a new Facebook group because I kind of got on my old one, and now I'm into this new one that's, IVF donor egg situation. Just again to peep in there, see what's going on, what's happening. Yeah, it can be overwhelming, but I keep it, I keep it at bay. But it has been good for information and questions. So epigenetics, I did not know what that was until I did. Can you break down for our audience, just quickly, what is epigenetics and how that relates or could possibly relate to the influence, as you mentioned, of like, you are growing this embryo, right? It's not your egg, but it's one little piece combined. You're growing it. You have influence over it. Can you just give us a little bit of what that actually means? I thought that was fascinating when I first saw it.
I love epigenetics because it's kind of like you're grafting of the vine onto the wine, the fruit tree, to the grapes. That's it, the grape tree. So what epigenetics means is that the chemical signals that the mother, carrying the baby, sends through her placenta to the growing baby that gives it directions on, so this is super simplified, but like today we're going to make an ear. Okay. So it's going to make an ear. Everybody has their ear made the same way. It's just how it comes out is different. Okay. So if you've ever been to one of those painting parties where they say, everyone's going to paint the same picture, everyone paints the same picture, but they all look a little different. Okay. That's exactly what epigenetics is. So what happens is you influence your own chemistry. You can't change the genotype. Okay. The genotype is like you have blue eyes or brown eyes, or you have straight hair or curly hair, or the shade of your skin. That's going to be in your genes. And that's what you're getting from the donor. But your phenotype of how it's expressed is up to you. So how does it come out expressed in that baby? Remember, 99% of us are all the same. And so basically, epigenetics is telling us that the mom has a lot more influence. The baby's always going to have the genes of the mom and the mom, the donor, and the dad. Because remember, your genes will actually float around in your baby's body their whole life. Okay. And your babies will float around in your body your whole life. So it's not, I think that
Yeah.
I'm not in the group that believes that the donor needs to be part of your family, that you need to embrace them, that your kid
Yeah.
needs to fall in love with you. She gave you a gift. She got compensated for her gift, but she gave you a gift. We really appreciate it. And if your kid wants to know who she is, I'm all for that. But making it a 3-parenting thing is not for me. And my
Yeah.
colleagues think I'm kind of nut job about it. But I'm all for disclosure. I'm all for letting your child know about it. But I'm not for, oh, come over and have coffee with us. She's not the mom.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got the stretch marks,
Right. You went through labor or whatever, however
right?
got here. So I'm glad you brought that up. So I guess one of the things that when I've considered and did the whole rabbit hole, in random days about, okay, let's say we have this child and down the road, the ID disclosure, right? I know that some places are now requiring it at 18, some are not. I know you said you agree with that. And I think I also agree just from a standpoint of my child should know, again, in my opinion, I think it's almost like adoption, right? Like, I think, you have the right to know. And I also don't agree with inviting over coffee because I don't think that'd be okay with me at all. To each his own. But have you talked to many donor conceived children as adults? Is that, I don't, have you
I
personally?
do. And I do have I will try to be brief because I could talk
Yeah.
for like 4 hours on this. But
We'll do part 2.
okay. The big thing about what I call disclosure to your child is, in my opinion, it has to start early. Like you're nursing them. They're a month old. I wanted you so much. I'm so
Yes.
glad somebody helped
Yes.
me. Okay.
Yep.
And that way you get used to say it rolls off your tongue. Okay. I knew a woman that was in one of my fertility support groups back in the day when I worked at a clinic, that she came to the support group because she wanted to learn how to tell her children who were 16, you missed the boat. Okay. You got to tell them early. And the deal is you tell them in age appropriate ways. And there's so much stuff out there how to do it. Okay. So that's one thing. I totally believe in disclosure to your child is their information. I'm also a believer in that it's on a need to know basis for the rest of the world. So in other words, it's fine for you to tell your best friend and it's fine for you to tell your mom and your sisters or whatever is in your close thing, but you don't need to tell every single person because it's not your information. It's your child's information. It's your child's information. Can you imagine if, all of our parents have done really bad, embarrassing things to us. Okay. So you multiply that by 10 and everywhere your kid goes, the people go, oh, they're from a donor. And that's fine, but it's up to your child to say that. So I know kids because they're now in their 20s. I've been doing this for so long that they're just nonchalant about it. No big deal. Yeah, I'm dating this girl. I told her about that just to make sure we weren't related to each other. Ha ha ha. But so I think that the pendulum swings. There was this whole anonymous, we never have to tell anybody. And then it swung in the other direction to like, we should all be singing Kumbaya and coming to Hanukkah together.
Yeah, no, that's important. And thank you for that. Cause I think it's important to say it's their information, not your information. And I totally agree. I love all the books that I see now and like, how to tell your kid and, making it age appropriate. Like I agree. I also feel very, very firmly that I would tell my child continuously to that same point. I want to do so much. Someone help me. I wrote a whole book about it.
They don't really care. Okay, I want to tell you,
Yeah.
my experience has been because I went down this rabbit hole of doing a lot of research on this subject because I was kind of writing to people when they came to us. I had information to give them, so I wanted to, make it accurate. And for the most part, the kids are more curious about the sex part. Like, what do you mean? Right. And it's kind of interesting because I think the people that conquered it the most and did the best jobs were the one that tied it in to how babies are made. Okay. And the smart people will talk about how babies are made when the kids are 4 or 5 years old in simple ways. And so they tell them the names of the parts. Okay. So that they don't go around the rest of their lives calling it a pee-pee, And so it sounds really bad when 30-year-old men call it their pee-pee, So that's one thing. And then they just add in, and some people need X, Y, and Z, and then they brought it up. And then you don't have to bring it up every day. It's something that happens a couple times a year. And as they get to be 8 and 10 and 14, and the interesting thing is, I've found out that by the time that they've become teenagers, they're either super curious and want to know all this information, or they're kind of like, whatever. The vast majority are whatever. And the people in the field don't want to acknowledge that. They don't want to acknowledge that. Most kids are like, thank you for the information. I'm interested in more, but I don't necessarily have to go know this person.
Yeah. No, that's good. So I know we'll need part 2, 3, 4, 5 later, but as we try to wrap up. So first thing, so PhD bioethics. Let's do a quick, what are the, I guess, current conversations or topics of discussion when it comes to, morals and ethics, when it comes to egg donor solutions or egg donor situations.
Right.
I've heard some horrible things, people say whatever, but what have you seen or heard, I guess, recently that is really still kind of on the topic of this is not ethical or it is ethical, and how people are dealing with that, I guess, in their determination of, do I do this or not?
Well, bioethics has 4 tenets. Their autonomy, which means we all make our own decisions. Non-maleficence, which means you're not going to do any harm. Beneficence, which means you're going to do good for someone else. And justice, which means you're going to make sure that people are all treated the same. So with that in mind, I would say that, to me personally, the 2 ethical dilemmas I see right now in egg donation and then surrogacy or third-party parenting are, number one, people that are way too old to have children. And this is the soapbox I'm going to die on. I really think that once a woman and a man reach the age of natural menopause, which is like 52, 51, 52, that's kind of the average, say outlier to 53, 54, that should be it. That ship has sailed, people. That ship has sailed. I know everyone has issues. That ship has sailed. I see people come across my desk who are 60, 61. We finally have time to have a kid. Nope, that was 20 years ago. And so I'm very adamant about that. And my colleagues think I am not allowing people to practice autonomy by allowing them. Well, how can they have reproductive autonomy if you're saying X, Y, and Z? I said, but where's the justice for the child? Because what child needs to have their parents be incapacitated? And let's face it, if you have a kid at 55, when you're 75, he's 20 or she's 20. When they're 25, you're 80. And you may be still running and traveling and whatever, but you are still not the same parent they would have had if you were 25 when they were 60. And to me, that is a big disservice. And I find it heinous that nobody will sit there and say no. There you go. That's my thing. I
don't disagree with you. I don't. You know what I mean? I haven't been in that space yet, but I don't disagree with you at all. I always, again, go back to the child's best, what's best for the kid, what's the welfare look like, and if I'm going to be caring for my parents, at 20 something, like as a caregiver.
Can you? Seriously,
it's not fair. I said to the child.
My kids needed me more. Let's say I have a married daughter. Okay. So, but she's 27 and my other one's 27 too, because they're twins. Right. So for the last 10 years, there's more intenseness. It's not the physical parenting. It's not the load of driving them to carpool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now it's like, what am I going to do? The guy broke up with me. I don't know what's going on in my career. And you're 82. You're going to be dealing, I hope when I'm 82, I'm still vibrant, but I don't know if I'm going to be vibrant to a 27-year-old.
Correct. I agree with you. No issues over here.
So that's my number one. And my second one is really, controversial. And that is, I do not necessarily think that single men and women should have an egg donor and a surrogate when they're in their 50s because they didn't get married and they didn't find the right woman or whatever. I think that you have no partner, you want a child, you don't want a family. I feel differently if you're still of what I consider reproductive age. So if you're below
Sure.
55, I'm like,
Sure.
okay, I'm not buying all this, but for sure, I think it's your autonomy showing. But you're 57 and now you're a single guy and you've never been married, and all of a sudden you want to have a kid with a surrogate and an egg donor.
Yeah.
You want a science experiment.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. Benefit the child over
Get a
those.
dog.
Get a pet.
Get a pet. Get two pets.
So, so please tell us all about Family Solutions International, and also how can people find you? Web, social,
Great.
all of the things.
Okay, but before I go, I got to tell you what happened. I had twins and we had 5 pets.
Ooh.
Remember my husband, 1 kid, no pets.
He said, I'm up for whatever you say.
Right? And you know what? We're down to 1. Okay. We're
Yeah.
down to 1. They've all gone across the Rainbow Bridge and now we have 1 lone pet left. But anyway,
Aw.
Family Solutions International it's 3 companies. It's the Donor Solution, which is our egg donor site. We have Three Sister Surrogacy, which is our gestational carrier surrogacy site. And then we have the Fertility Consultants, which is the consulting part, which is what I'm going to keep when the other 2 go to my COO, which is basically people that go, you get a complimentary 20-minute consultation. I go over your history with you, and then I help you find out, based on what your insurance is, what your budget is, what the next step can be for you. A lot of times people use it when they're doing the egg donor thing and go, maybe it's time to change clinics. You have a very expensive clinic. Egg donation is really easy. Most clinics do it great. You don't need to be at that expensive clinic. You don't need to be at Neiman Marcus when, Target will work just as fine for you. And that's what I like. So that's the 3 companies. And it's Family Solutions International, all one word, familysolutionsinternational.com. And all 3 companies are there in little drop-down boxes. There you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This has been a lot of information, but all good information. And thank you for breaking this very complex conversation down for us in a way that's so relatable. As you guys know, Mary and her team are here to support you. She is one more resource in our ever-growing bucket of people that you can reach out to wherever you are in your journey. We are in season 4, and I'm trying to wrap it up. I know it's been a while. I know I've been on hiatus. I know all the things, but life, and we just adjust. So if you ever want to hear more about Fertility Affair, of course, go to all of our past episodes on wherever you stream, and also on YouTube from our last, 2 seasons now. And then, of course, follow on Instagram. Everything is at Fertility Ain't Fair, because we know it ain't. And what else? I think that's it. We'll have a few more episodes. We'll wrap this season up, and then we'll go into the holidays, and we'll see where we land, because who knows what is next for us in our journey. So as I always say, I'm your forever friend in fertility. Stay hopeful.